The morning began with silence, no birds, no laughter, only the hollow groan of the wind slipping through cracks in the wooden shack. 17-year-old Min Jun opened his eyes to the same sight he had seen for years: peeling walls, sagging roof, and his younger sister curled up on the floor beside him, too weak to rise. Her lips were pale, her body thin as kindling. He touched her shoulder gently, but she barely stirred. In the corner, his mother crouched over a dented pot, stirring a watery soup made from grass and bark she had gathered the day before. The bitter smell filled the room, and Min Xian's stomach clenched painfully. This was breakfast. This was survival. "Eat slowly," his mother whispered as she poured the green liquid into chipped bowls. Her voice carried the weight of desperation, as though saying it might somehow make the soup more filling. Min Jian obeyed, sipping carefully, pretending it was enough. Outside, the town stirred with quiet despair. Posters of the great leader, eyes painted wide and unblinking, stared down from crumbling walls. Mounted on poles blared patriotic songs no one believed in anymore. Neighbors shuffled to the marketplace with hollow eyes, clutching scraps of cloth or rusted tools to barter for food. No one spoke too loudly. The air itself seemed wired with suspicion. Min Jian followed his mother to the market that day, watching as soldiers dragged away a boy no older than his sister's crime, stealing a cob of corn from a government storehouse. The boy's cries echoed through the square until a guard silenced him with a blow. No one dared intervene. The crowd dispersed quickly, each person terrified of being next. Min Jun clenched his fists, anger burning inside him. This was not life. It was slow death under watchful eyes. That night, lying on the floor beside his sleeping sister, they stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant growl of military dogs. In his mind, he saw the river that lay beyond the mountains, the border between this cage and the world beyond. The thought terrified him. And yet, for the first time, it began to feel like a choice. The candlelight flickered weakly in the small shack, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. Min Jun sat cross-legged beside his sister, watching her chest rise and fall in uneven breaths. Hunger had made her fragile, bird-like. Each shallow breath sounded like a clock ticking away her time. His mother, face gaunt and worn from years of sacrifice, leaned close to him and whispered, "You must not let her see your fear. If she sees it in your eyes, she will give up." Her voice trembled, not from cold, but from the constant weight of living under eyes that never blinked. That night, while his sister finally drifted into uneasy sleep, Min Jian overheard neighbors speaking through the thin walls. Their voices were low, but he caught fragments. Escape. River. Freedom. The words sent a shiver down his spine. Escape was treason. Even knowing of someone's plan could condemn a family to prison camps. Still, the word freedom pulsed in his mind like a forbidden flame. The following day at the marketplace, he noticed something he hadn't before. A man, one of the farmers, exchanged glances with another before slipping him a folded scrap of paper hidden beneath a sack of potatoes. Nothing was said, but Min Jun recognized the fear in their faces. He realized that then secrets were moving quietly among them, like a river flowing underground. People were planning, risking, dreaming, but dreams were dangerous. That very afternoon, a soldier beat an old woman for hoarding grain, forcing the villagers to watch. Her cries lingered in the cold air long after the soldier left, and Min Jun could see the silent terror etched into every face. Nobody dared to help her. That night, lying awake, Min Jun thought of his father, who had died years earlier in a labor camp for disloyalty. He remembered his father's last words: "If there is even one chance, you must take it. Life cannot be lived in chains." The words fused with the whispers he had overheard, becoming a quiet drumbeat in his heart. For the first time, he imagined himself moving under the cover of night. Toward the river, toward a horizon he had never seen. And for the first time, he felt that escape was not just a dream, it was a calling. The moon hung low over the mountains, casting silver light across the frozen fields. Min Jun crept silently through the snow, clutching a small satchel containing scraps of rice and the folded paper from the farmer. His heart pounded as he imagined Korean soldiers patrolling the roads, their boots crunching like thunder in the night. One wrong move, and his family could pay the price. He paused behind a cluster of trees, breath visible in the frigid air. The satchel felt heavier than it was, filled with both hope and fear. For weeks he had watched the river from a distance, noting the patrol routes and the thin stretches of ice that might hold his weight. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the quiet night. Suddenly a twig snapped. Minjan froze. From the darkness, the gleam of boots appeared Korean soldiers. He flattened himself against the ground, barely daring to breathe. The soldiers' flashlights swept over the snowy field, their eyes sharp, unblinking. The world seemed to hold its breath. Minutes passed, which felt like hours, and then the lights moved on. Minjun exhaled slowly, his body trembling with both relief and adrenaline. He pressed on every step, bringing him closer to the river, closer to a freedom he had never touched. By the time he reached the edge of the frozen water, dawn was just a faint glow on the horizon. He examined the ice carefully, thin in spots, thick in others. One wrong step could mean plunging into icy death, yet he couldn't turn back. His sister's hollow eyes and his mother's whispered prayers echoed in his mind. He had no choice but to trust his calculations, his courage, and the fragile strength of his own 2 feet. As he carefully inched across the ice, he heard the distant barking of a dog and the echo of boots. His pulse raced, sweat freezing on his skin. The river seemed endless, but he forced one careful step after another. Halfway across, the ice creaked ominously. But something inside him refused to give up. For the first time, Minjun realized that courage was not the absence of fear, it was the choice to move forward despite it.
Oh.
And in that moment, he took a breath, whispered his sister's name, and stepped toward hope. The ice groaned beneath Minjun's weight, each creak like a warning shouted into the frozen night. His fingers were numb, his legs aching, but he forced himself forward. The river stretched like a silver ribbon, glinting under the pale moonlight, and every step felt like a gamble with death. From the opposite bank, he could just make out faint movements, Korean soldiers patrolling in a slow rhythm, their flashlights slicing the darkness. He pressed himself flat against the ice, hiding in the small grooves and ridges, trying to make himself invisible. Every second felt eternal. One slip, one glance in the wrong direction, and everything his family, his hope, his life would vanish. As he crawled forward, memories of home flashed in his mind, his mother's thin hands pressing a bowl of rice into his sister's lap. The quiet lullabies that barely masked hunger, the fear etched in his father's eyes when the soldiers came around. Each memory was a weight, a reminder of why he had to make it across. Halfway across, the ice cracked sharply beneath him. Panic surged like fire. He froze, listening. A distant bark echoed from the far bank, a dog trained to sniff out any intruder. Minchun's chest tightened, and for a moment, he thought it was the end. The dog's growl grew louder, accompanied by the low murmur of voices. Then he remembered the folded paper, the secret map, the safe path marked by neighbors who risked their own lives to help. With trembling hands, he adjusted his course, pressing forward with careful determination. Inch by inch, he moved, balancing fear with calculation, the taste of hope mixing with the cold river air. Finally, he saw it. A small ledge of firm ground ahead where snow had piled like a fragile shield. Relief surged, but he didn't dare celebrate. One final step, and he clambered onto the bank, rolling into the snow. His heart pounded, lungs gasping, but he was alive. For the first time, Minjun allowed himself a moment to look back at the river he had crossed, the barrier between the life he had known and the life he dreamed of. Shadows of the Korean soldiers lingered, but for now, they were behind him. For the first time, hope felt tangible, and the possibility of freedom no longer a distant dream. Minjan stumbled through the forest, the snow crunching under his worn shoes. Each step a reminder that the Korean soldiers could still be on his trail. His body ached from the river crossing, muscles screaming in protest, but he pushed forward. Guided by the faint outline of a small hut marked on the secret map, this shelter, hidden by trees and overgrown brush, was a lifeline, a place to recover before taking the next dangerous step toward freedom. As he approached, he kept low, scanning the perimeter for any sign of danger. Every shadow could conceal a patrol, every gust of wind could betray his presence. The hut appeared abandoned, but he remembered the neighbor's warning. Trust no one, Even kindness can be a trap. His heart thumped as he reached the wooden door and eased it open, the hinges groaning softly. Inside, the air was cold but dry, and straw lined a small corner. He sank to the floor, pressing his hands to his face, tears threatening to fall. For the first time, he allowed himself to think of home, his sister's hopeful smile, his mother's whispered prayers, his father's quiet determination. Each memory was both a comfort and a torment, reminding him of what he had risked to survive. Minutes stretched into hours as he huddled in the corner, rations in his satchel, barely enough to stave off hunger. Outside, the forest was alive with sounds, the distant bark of a dog, the faint echo of boots, but inside, he felt a fragile bubble of safety. He knew it wouldn't last. The soldiers would search, rumors of his crossing might reach their ears. Yet, in that small, hidden space, Minjun felt the first flicker of control over his fate. He laid out the paper map and traced his next moves, planning the route that could lead him to freedom. The risk was enormous, but for the first time, he believed he could make it. Hope, fragile but unwavering, pulsed through him like a quiet heartbeat, stronger than fear, stronger than the icy river behind him. With one last glance at the forest shadows, he whispered a promise to his family: "I will survive. I will see you again." And for the first time, the word freedom didn't feel impossibly, felt within reach. Darkness had settled like a heavy blanket over the forest, yet Minjun couldn't rest. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made his heart jump. He knew the Korean soldiers could be nearby, searching relentlessly for anyone daring to escape. His body was exhausted, muscles stiff from the river and the long trek, but sleep was a luxury he could not afford. He crouched near the hut, wrapped in a thin blanket, eyes scanning the shadows. The map lay beside him, detailing a path through the hills and hidden trails that could take him toward the border. He traced it with trembling fingers, memorizing every bend, every landmark. One wrong step could lead to capture or worse. Memories of home crowded his mind. His sister's laughter when he sneaked her a piece of rice. His mother's whispered prayers in the dark, his father's stern yet loving gaze. These thoughts were bittersweet. They fueled his determination, but also reminded him of what he had left behind. Suddenly, a distant bark shattered the silence. His stomach knotted. The Korean soldiers' dogs were trained to sniff out fear, hunger, and desperation. Minjun froze, heart pounding, listening. The sound faded, replaced by the hoot of an owl and the wind rustling through the trees. He exhaled slowly, realizing that for now, he was safe. He spent the night crouched in the shadows, alternating between watching the forest and catching brief, restless moments of sleep. Each minute was a battle between exhaustion and vigilance. In the small hours, he whispered to himself, just a little further, just a little longer. The promise of freedom, of seeing his family again, became his anchor. As dawn broke, painting the forest in pale light, Minjun rose carefully. He knew the path ahead would be treacherous, filled with unseen dangers and desperate choices. Yet for the first time in weeks, he felt the fragile warmth of hope. The river behind him had tested his courage, and the night watch had hardened his resolve. With one final glance at the forest that had sheltered him, he stepped forward, ready to chase the life he had risked everything to claim. The morning frost clung to Minjun's clothes as he approached the marshlands that lay between him and the next safe haven. The air was sharp and biting, each breath leaving a misty trail in the pale dawn light. The frozen marsh stretched out before him like a treacherous puzzle-thin ice, hidden patches of water and brittle reeds that threatened to collapse underfoot. Every step required careful calculation. A wrong move could plunge him into the freezing water, leaving him vulnerable to hypothermia or worse. The Korean soldiers who patrolled nearby. He crouched low, moving silently, listening for any sign of pursuit. The distant sound of boots on the frost made his pulse race. He paused behind a mound of reeds, pressing his hands to his chest to steady his breathing. Memories of home haunted him. His mother's trembling hands as she handed him a piece of stale bread. His sister's hopeful eyes pleading for him to return safely. His father's firm voice urging courage. These memories were fuel, reminding him why he risked everything. Each careful step was a promise to them, a vow that he would survive, that he would return. Halfway across, a section of thin ice cracked under his weight. Panic surged through him, but he forced his mind to focus, spreading his weight and crawling slowly over the fragile surface. Every muscle screamed in protest, but he refused to give in. The marsh seemed endless, a frozen expanse of danger, yet he pressed on, guided by the distant line of trees that marked the edge of safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached solid ground. His body shivered violently, but he allowed himself a moment to breathe, to acknowledge the triumph of survival. The marsh had tested his courage, his endurance, and his resolve, but he had crossed. Looking back, he saw only the frozen wasteland and the shadows of the past that chased him. Ahead, there was hope, a path leading him closer to freedom, to life beyond the fear and cruelty of the Korean soldiers. Min Jin straightened, shoulders stiff but determined, and whispered to the wind, "I will make it. I will see my family again." And with that fragile hope guiding him, he pressed forward into the unknown. By late afternoon, Minjan reached the edge of a dense forest, where the trees thickened and blocked the harsh light of the sun. Beyond the trees, he spotted smoke curling into the sky, a sign of human presence. His heart raced. Could this be a safe place? A hidden village where people helped escapees? Or would it be a trap set by Korean soldiers? Cautiously he approached, moving silently between shadows. The villagers were few, faces weathered and cautious, eyes wary of strangers. He noticed children playing in the snow, women carrying water, and men tending small fires. Life seemed ordinary, almost peaceful, but the tension was palpable. Every glance felt like a test. A woman stepped forward, her gaze sharp, yet not unkind. "You're far from home," she said softly, offering a small loaf of bread. Minjan accepted it with trembling hands, the warmth of human kindness cutting through the cold numbness in his heart. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile, savoring the taste of real food and the comfort of safety, even if temporary. That night, he slept in a hidden hut, huddled under blankets provided by the villagers. Outside, the wind howled, carrying the distant threat of Korean soldiers. Inside, he felt a fragile security, a reminder that trust, however rare, could exist. Memories of his family filled him again, his sister's laughter, his mother's worried eyes, and he promised himself he would survive to see them once more. By dawn, Minjan knew he could not stay. The village was a sanctuary, not a destination. They gave him supplies, whispered advice about safe paths, and a small map marking the safest route toward the border. With a final nod of gratitude, he stepped into the forest, carrying not just the provisions, but a rekindled sense of hope. The hidden village had tested him in a different way, not with danger, but with trust. And now, with hope and human kindness on his side, he moved forward, determined to continue the perilous journey that could finally lead him to freedom. Minjan's journey had led him to the edge of the last great obstacle, the river that marked the border between oppression and freedom. The water was icy, swollen from recent rains, and the current ran faster than he could imagine. Crossing it was the only way forward, but also the most dangerous. Every instinct screamed caution. He waited until nightfall, darkness masking his movements. The stars were hidden behind thick clouds, leaving only the faint shimmer of moonlight on the water. His heart pounded as he tested the current with a stick. It was strong enough to sweep him away, yet the thought of freedom, of finally seeing his family again, fueled him forward. Slowly he waded into the icy water, muscles burning as he fought against the current. Each stroke brought him closer to the opposite bank, yet danger lurked in every ripple. Halfway across, the river's roar drowned out his heartbeat, and he felt panic rise. He gripped a small rope he had tied to a nearby tree on the bank, pulling himself inch by inch, refusing to succumb to exhaustion. Behind him, the distant sound of Korean soldiers' boots reminded him of the stakes. One wrong move could mean capture, one slip could end everything. But in front of him lay hope, the faint outline of the land that promised freedom, a chance to live beyond fear and starvation. Finally, Minjun stumbled onto the opposite bank, soaked and shivering, yet triumphant. Tears froze on his cheeks, mingling with the mud. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to breathe deeply, to feel the fragile warmth of survival. The river had been merciless, but it could not defeat him. As he looked back across the dark waters, he whispered a vow to himself and to his family. "I will make it. We will all be free." The river, once a symbol of fear, now marked the beginning of a new life. Every hardship, every narrow escape, had led him to this moment, a moment of hope, courage, and the promise of freedom beyond the shadows of North Korea. Minchun's feet finally touched the soft earth of the distant borderlands. The first hints of dawn painted the sky with streaks of gold and rose. For the first time in weeks, he felt the weight of fear begin to lift from his chest. The Korean soldiers, the freezing rivers, the treacherous marshes, all of it was behind him. Ahead lay a land where he could breathe, speak, and live, without hiding, without trembling at every sound. He stumbled forward until he reached a small settlement just across the border. Villagers, unlike the hidden North Korean settlements, welcomed him openly, offering blankets, food, and water. Minchun's body shivered from exhaustion, yet his heart swelled with relief and gratitude. A kind woman placed a steaming bowl of soup in his hands, and for a long moment he allowed himself to cry, not from despair, but from the overwhelming weight of survival and hope. As he sat near the fire, he thought of his family. He had promised to return, and now, with contacts provided by the new village, he could plan to reunite with them. Every scar, every bruise, every sleepless night had been a step toward this moment. Freedom was not just a word, it was a living, breathing reality before him. He took a deep breath, feeling the sun's first warmth on his face, and whispered a prayer for his family's safety. The journey had been perilous, but courage, hope, and the small acts of kindness along the way had carried him through. Minjun stood, shoulders straight, eyes bright with determination. He would continue forward, not just for himself, but for his loved ones. The river behind him, once a symbol of fear and danger, now glistened as a testament to his perseverance. The forests and marshes that had tried to hold him captive were now memories of a life he survived. Minjun smiled, free at last, ready to embrace a future filled with possibility, love, and the peace that comes after enduring unimaginable hardships. Freedom, he realized, was not just crossing a river, it was the courage to keep moving forward, no matter the obstacles.